Hey, I'm very excited to have a guest. It's a title I don't think we've ever had on the show. Senior Maverick at Wired, author of many books. I think most recently, The Excellent Advice for Living, and one that sticks in my memory, New Rules for the New Economy. Driver of the Recommendo newsletter. Pretty engaged with that. But Kevin Kelly, welcome to What If So What.
It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I really appreciate it. Anything else I left out? I know that you've done a lot in the career, so over the years.
I'm involved with the War Now Foundation, which is trying to foster long-term responsibility. We're the people who built the 10,000-year clock ticking away in the mountain.
Right, right. Um, so Kevin, I was telling you, I feel like I've known you for a long time, and even though we just met, because as I was kind of starting out my career is when Wired came out, but
Mm-hmm.
actually, little story. When I was in engineering school, I sort of treated it like a job, and I had class in the morning, and I would grab lunch on campus, and then I like to get my homework done in the library. And in the library, there was one room devoted to just newspapers and magazines. That was kind of my favorite place to go. I just liked the tone of that place, and I was always looking for a distraction. One of my distractions was the Whole Earth Review, and that sort of it really kind of touched part of me that, as I was sitting there doing math problems for 4 hours, and I got this sort of a different side that I really needed to be sort of triggered and nurtured in me. So I didn't. So we go back maybe in my own history a little farther than I thought. So
Well, cool. Great.
appreciate that. Yeah. So I try to keep kind of a diverse set of interests. This I want to. You've got so many great thoughts and elements of wisdom, and I think have really brought a different perspective to technology. And we focus a lot on digital. I'm going to throw you some questions around that, but one of the things that this podcast is focused on is for me is sort of grounding things in reality. We work with a lot of business people who hear about technology and they just want to, like, how can I make money off of this as fast as possible? Or and so there's a lot of grounding in reality, and you've talked a lot about goofing off and experimentation, and that's really what prototyping is, and that's really what research is. You don't know what you're going to find, but I think a lot of our audience appreciates that, but they're looking for what's going to work tomorrow and what's in it for me. So we like to explore both sides of that. But when you've seen a lot of technology come and go, how do you sort of spot something that you think is overhyped, or is, boy, that might be BS, or it might be a BBS today? Like, what's your radar for judging a technology on first look?
I think there's a lot of thinkism, the fallacy of thinkism in the world, which is that thinkism's premise is that you can figure things out by thinking about them, that you can solve problems by thinking about them, that you can evaluate things by thinking about them. And I think that's way, way overused. I like to use things. I think we discover things by using them.
Yeah.
So when new things come along, I try as much as possible to use them in order to have an opinion about them, use them to understand them. Because I think, like AI, we've been thinking about it for a century.
Right.
And we're now at the point where we can actually use it. And we're going to learn a lot more, and I learn a lot more by using them as much as I can as a way of trying to understand and evaluate them. So I would say when a new technology comes along, if at all possible, to try and have the experience of it, that helps me evaluate. Otherwise, I feel kind of lost. And there's a lot, say, in the medical world where it's not really that consumer facing in that sense of
Right.
You can try the latest vaccine. Although,
Let's go.
I'm taking all the vaccines I can. It's still a better way. I mean, it's one of the ways that I use to try and evaluate is to actually have a firsthand experience. And the second way is to talk to other people who are also using them to some way, because I think even the inventors of things don't really know what they've invented. There's a very famous story of Thomas Edison, who invented the phonograph, and shortly after he invented the phonograph, he actually didn't have any idea what it would be used for. And so he made a list in his notebooks of the 10 things that he thought this invention, the phonograph, might be used for. And number one was it would record the last words of the dying. You could have them after they're gone. And the second one was that you would be able to replicate great sermons at church. And way down last was like, we could record music on it.
Right.
So even the inventors, and this is true of this current crop of LLMs, they were not trying to invent a reasoning machine. They were making language translation software. And so in order to understand what something is, we actually have to use it for a while. So if I can't use it for a while, I want to talk to someone else who's actually using it in some capacity, because that's where we're going to learn about its potentiality, its potential for good, for harm. And it's not by thinking about it that we're going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I know when the design thinking became very popular a few years ago, and I think it's kind of gone, it's one of those things that is sort of goes in and out of style, maybe has different labels, but we kind of made the observation that, well, it's kind of counterintuitive, because design thinking is actually maybe building. I'm not just thinking about it. I'm just doing it, but it doesn't have the same ring, So no, I like that very much. I think we do way more prototypes and POCs, and ironically, Gen AI has given us a lot of opportunity to do things very quickly, right? Which and economically. So
right. And just generally, you didn't ask this, but it's very clear to me that the primary users of AI on a daily basis are coders, right? I mean, this again, nobody anticipated that if you take language translation models and you keep amplifying and making it bigger and bigger, you suddenly make the best tool ever for coding. And in retrospect, well, coding is kind of a language, maybe that makes sense. But that's the primary daily user of these tools right now, are people who are coding. And so in that realm, in that field, this is an absolute disruptive technology.
Right. Yeah, I think we're certainly applying that every day. And I just left a conversation where a client, is, I think there's a lot more trust in that. I would say a year ago, there was a lot of hesitation around it, but as more people try it, it's panning out. And so people are asking, we thought people would come to us and say, if you adopt these tools in your everyday practices, can I pay you less money? What they're actually saying is, could you do more in the same amount of time, which is kind of refreshing. So, it's exciting.
Or even do better in the same amount of time.
Well, and do better. Yeah. And we're seeing that too. We have to
even better than more.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's a pattern in AI driven software where one agent writes the code, the other one reviews it. And that sort of takes off, and I'm not sure how everyone else is doing it, but that from a quality perspective, it is definitely exceeding the human in the loop review. So we're pretty excited about that. But I'm glad to hear that validation, that sort of trying is understanding and seeing is believing. And
Right, right.
Like I told my kids when they're growing up and they said they didn't like Brussels sprouts, I said, you
Mhm.
can't have that opinion unless you try just one Brussels sprout. So, you have to, in our house was that you at least had to try it and then you could have any opinion you wanted.
Exactly, yes.
One of the things that I was curious about and um, love your perspective again, sort of with your kind of long-term view. One of the things that we talk about a lot are sort of recurring themes in technology adoption. So again, buying into the hype is one of them, right? Or, um, you know, um, um, skipping the requirements. Like, can we just skip the requirements? Can we skip the QA? Do we need that QA team? Um, not listening to your end users or customers, or not being in the situation that they are in. Can we just copy the other guys? Do you see patterns in terms of like the way technology is adopted and adapted? Do you see those? Why do you think some of these patterns re, recur over and over again? Do we just have short-term memories? Do we just have a new group of people? Is there some human, drive that forces us to sort of misalign our expectations?
That's a really fair question. I would say a recent pattern that I have noticed within my own lifetime in adoption of technology is that, unlike when I was, say, a kid in the 50s and 60s reading science fiction, I think today, when people first encounter a technology, their very first reflective response is, how is this going to bite me? I know it's going to bite me sooner or later.
Right. It's just a matter of time. How is it going to
Yeah,
do it?
right.
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, this is amazing, this is fantastic. The very first response is, I know this looks cool, but
Yeah.
it's going to hurt
What's
somewhere
the
along the.
catch?
What's the catch? Exactly. And I think that's not going to go away. I don't think it's just a phase. I think that's sort of a grown up
Yeah.
phase. But a response that we don't hear very much on, that might be added to this, is one of the things that I've noticed is that technologies behave very differently when they become ubiquitous. And so when you were trying to think about this, is much more about trying to forecast rather than just trying to use it. But when we're trying to think about it, is that you always want to say, understand, like, what happens when everybody has it, because when everybody has it, if there's a phase shift, something weird happens when just a few people have it versus when everybody has
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And so there, you kind of, it's like when a few people have cell phone versus when everybody has one. Um, and so I'm not McLuhan like in saying, well, things flip around and they're inverse of it, but there is a difference. The more is different in the sense that there is a quantitative change that happens when you saturate it with ubiquity. And some of them are positive and some are negative, but the species is changes. The technology actually undergoes a phase shift when you have ubiquity. And so you kind of have to have two phases of evaluation: one when it's just a few people, and then one when it's saturated.
Yeah. You think, we often think about, there's always leaders and laggards
Right.
and fast followers um, totally different kind of question here, Kevin. We're wrestling with, we've wrestled with this forever. Is this the term digital? So there are three words that somebody coined a phrase for a label for these words. He called them white noise words. And so I have a little bucket of white noise words: digital, strategy, and innovation, which is the team I run here. So it's compounded daily. These are words that have
You mean you run the digital innovation strategy? Is that what
the
you're
digital,
saying?
yeah, the strategic innovation in digital.
Right, right.
Exactly. So you know exactly what I'm saying.
All
So
right.
we just haven't found good substitutes, for
Right.
these terms. But one of the things that has always hung us up, I think we have great definitions of innovation. I think that are established. Strategy is another nebulous one. People are like they can't see the difference between a strategy and a plan. So there's been a lot written about that. But the word digital, I think you'll have a perspective on it. So we asked the question, what is digital? We gave 5 definitions, and we could really kind of only get one of them to sort of land in terms of a sort of statistical alignment. We also threw a bunch of things out there, and we said, is this digital or not? So, for example, an ERP system, is that digital? No, that's not digital. Well, why not? It's on a big computer. It's in the cloud. Yeah, but that's running the back office. Okay, well, I scratched my head on that one. And we said, what if that ERP functionality was on a mobile app? Is that digital? Oh, that's digital. Yeah, we know it when we see it. It's like, certain definitions, right? Well, we don't know how to define it, but we know it when we see it. And so what's your take on that? What makes something digital in this day and age?
It's funny because at least in my circle, I don't hear that term being used very much more. Um,
That's
I mean,
that's that's
fr-
great. That's
from
actually a great data point.
from my point of view, um, it means things that are virtual, not analog, meaning that their value is informational, communicatable, and I would almost say that if if it's being carried on electrons, it's digital.
Sure.
Um, so like I'm trying to think of the edge cases on this.
Right.
Uh, most money today is digital,
Mm-hmm.
such as blockchain and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
the money moving around the world doesn't exist as paper; it's digital.
Right.
Um,
Right.
after you put the ballot in the machine, you're voted digital.
Yep.
It's
It's
kept
digitized or digitalized.
digitized.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, um, it hasn't really been that distinction hasn't really been important in kind of where I'm traveling.
Sure. Sure. Well, I bring it up because I think I'm actually encouraged to hear that because we still, and it'll kind of leads into my next question,
Yeah.
because some of these big companies and I think some of these large organizations do struggle with that, and um
What we struggle in what way?
so I'll they with they it's I think a lot of organizations find it easier to sort of manage their resources, right? It's as simple as just sort of, let's build a hierarchical structure in my organization. And I'll give you an example of maybe an insurance company. So they have a big system, probably a mainframe, or that manages the claims, keeps records of health records,
Okay,
manages big system, the core functions, what they would
sure.
call the core day-to-day functions of the business. But as a member, I have my ID card in a mobile application.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will look at those two services, those two functions, in two different lenses, with two different types
Oh.
of people, with two different types of
Oh,
leaders.
really? Why?
That's what we're trying to understand. That's what we're trying to understand. And where those worlds clash is when we say, well, what if we wanted to provide, another function where we look at the claims history,
Right, right. I see.
and I give you an alert. Well, and wait a minute, now I have to get these people together with these people. I have to get the, the legacy people together with the digital
Oh,
people, and
actually,
I have a hard time managing. I think a lot of organizations struggle with that.
all right, so the image that came to me of Stuart Brand's pace layering. So the difference is not whether electronic. The difference is the rate at which they're changing. It's the pace at which they move that's different. One is moving very faster, and the other one is and like things like executive function moves at a much slower pace. It should, you should be thinking a couple of years in advance
Yeah,
of what I'm doing tomorrow. But it sounds like there's a discontinuity between the pace layering
right,
between those different ones. It's not whether they're electronic; it's just how fast they're moving.
right. Well, I kind of, like I said, it was kind of a setup for this question,
Yeah,
and thanks for that perspective. Actually, that pacing hadn't really
right,
factored
right, right.
in, because what we're trying to do is sort of identify, like, okay, what are the attributes of something that makes it
True, true.
more digital or less digital, aside from the obvious digitization.
And I think they have to do is how fast it's moving, how fast it's changing. But
Yeah.
so, what's the next question?
So the question was, so we also find that we run when we a lot of organizations who are looking to, again, modernize. Let's take the example of maybe an automaker or an insurance company, and they feel that they have to make a leap, they have to get ahead, and a lot of these companies are now, they're becoming or trying to become what they call software companies. And if you go to an automaker in Detroit today, and if you go in the building, they don't look like, they don't feel like they did 10 years ago. I feel like I'm in Mountain View, I'm
Mm,
in, I'm not, I'm in the
right,
Midwest.
right.
And these companies also bring in cross industry leaders. So let's say, well, I'll have to get this guy from a, a commerce, a retailer, and they're going to come in and they're going to tell me how to be more digital and more agile or move a little better. And it doesn't always work out. And I equate it to some of the things you've talked about. I may have missed this, but around sabbaticals, around goofing off, and it's kind of like I related what you've said about sabbaticals and goofing off to, well, we're bringing someone in here to help us goof off faster, right? And so if we
Mhm.
bring somebody in with an outside perspective, then we can transform the business magically. So I just, I wanted your take on that. If you see that, and, do you see companies that are very traditional, um, maybe have a very, like I said, a legacy business, a manufacturing oriented business, or an insurance company that changes very slowly. How do you see those companies adopting or changing the mindset to move very quickly, or to bring on some of these innovations?
The one thing I have learned, and by the way, most of my fans are in China, and China this has sort of been the ongoing assignment in China, because China had all these state-run industrial manufacturing things that in 10 times as many as in the US, all being urged by the central government to digitize, to become an internet company. And they're all trying to do this. The
Really?
one thing I have observed was that as AI has come in, a lot of companies think that they want to digitize so they can bring AI in, but actually there's a step after digitization that they need to do, which is they have to become a cloud company to become an AI company. It's not just electrifying and digitizing stuff, it's actually the transformation of the entire org structure to become cloud oriented, where you are doing, and that's really the only way that the AI is going to work at a large scale in a company like that. So I'm kind of making the challenge even worse of not just you get them to digitize, but it's like
Yeah.
that's not even far enough. It's how to get them onto the cloud, their cloud, as a cloud first company, to and allow the AI to come in, because the AI kind of needs to operate at the cloud layer. You can't just take little individualistic AIs and hope to get the maximum value out of that
Right.
unless it's operating at a cloud level. And
Right.
so I don't know if there's a way to kind of leapfrog where we're going to go from the manufacturing tool line to the cloud directly, but maybe that might be something to consider, and maybe it's even easier to do. I don't know. It's like leapfrogging with cell phones and rural development, and you just bypass the whole need to wire
Right. Right.
the countryside with copper. You just leapfrog. So maybe there's a way to leapfrog into the cloud that would be easier to do. I don't know.
Well, we're we're definitely seeing that happen. I think, cloud, moving data to the cloud, moving applications to the cloud, decoupling the organization.
Mhm.
I think these are just slow adoptions. Obviously, we have a rule: we don't talk about COVID anymore because it was just too much. It was a topic driving too much
Sure,
conversation. But
sure.
I remember, immediately. So we're literally 5 years ago. The banks that we worked with, where you had to be badged in the building and on site for security reasons. Well, somehow those security reasons all drifted away. They dissolved, in about 3 days. And there were no problems. But,
Mhm.
so I think it's there. I think it's the will wasn't there. The means are there. Um, I think, by the way, I appreciate your TED talk. I noticed it was 8 years ago on the second industrial revolution. And I thought, with AI, and it was great to hear that. And I think you made a prediction, and that I think you said something like there will be 10,000 startups, AI native startups, in the
Right,
next
right,
10
right.
years. I think I wonder what that number is. Maybe we'll go back and
Yeah, I
look.
know
Yeah, it
exactly.
might be 3 or 4 times that at this point. But
Yeah, especially around here. I mean, it's like I can't tell you the number. I had a friend who's at Stripe, which is the payment
yep.
district. They said we are not an AI company, but every day we're losing some of our best people to AI companies.
Oh yeah.
They're just and now they're all going to these AI startups everywhere in the valley. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I'm seeing other AI native businesses that are not even tech companies,
Right.
where we're harnessing it. So, we certainly felt that 10 years ago, kind of our machine learning and AI and cognitive computing. We were calling it cognitive computing. So we've seen it there. You mentioned it's been in our imaginations for a long time. I did a little trivia icebreaker in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and I said, what year? I asked what year the term was created, and I don't know how. I didn't double check this, but it was a paper. I think it was a professor at Dartmouth in 1956, and then I asked, well, what film was the first AI themed film? And it was Brave New World from, I want to say, 1924. I don't quote me on that, but it's in our imagination. It's driven a lot of things. I said, well, there's probably a biblical version, the Golem or something
Right,
like
right,
that,
right,
that
right, right.
is AI or robots.
Right, right.
So, yeah, wouldn't want to leave this conversation without talking about it. I mean, you agree. This is beyond a hype cycle. This is, we always started this conversation talking about hype cycles and what ifs. I think
Yeah,
there's,
well, there is still an incredible amount of hype, and most of the hype is actually coming from the doomers.
yeah,
The doomers are the ones who believe the hype the most. And so, there was a TED talk yesterday I watched live by Tristan Harris, who I know Tristan, and it was the end of the world kind of stuff, and because he totally believes the hype. Um, and so my observation about this is that the frontier is moving very, very, very fast, but the adoption is just going to take a long time because empirically you can't just introduce this technology nakedly. You have to adjust workflow. You have to adjust organizational shape. You have
Yeah.
to adjust the infrastructure to maximize it. And it's like it took a very long time for electricity to penetrate, because in a company, it just wasn't a matter of electrifying a company. They actually had VPs of electricity back then too, by the way. And so you had to change the physical arrangement of how the company looked like in offices, and electricity made them taller because you could communicate up and down. And so there was a lot of cultural implementation which just works at a different pace than the frontier research. And so um, I, I think it'll take us a decade to absorb the current models that we have today. Um, and so there's still a lot of hype about how fast this is going to work. And I don't think it's going that fast, which means that we can regulate it in normal ways. We don't have to regulate it before it even exists, which is what people kind of want to do. And so there is still a lot of hype. I think 10 years ago, there were a lot of people who really, really, really doubted that computers would ever be creative, that they'd ever be able to drive a car, that they would ever be able to pass SAT tests. They really, really did not believe that. And so we have overcome, I think for most people, we have overcome that initial disbelief. And so it has made it a little easier to believe the next impossible thing. And which, by the way, the thing that I'm saying that's coming next that people are not ready for is how emotional, what we're going to put in emotion to the AIs. And people have very strong bonds with them, and very, in the same way, if you can imagine the bonds that people have with pets who don't
Yeah.
talk back, but these are going to talk back, and they're going to have conversations. And so people will work with them every day and become very close to them in an emotional way that we're not prepared for. And people are going to be shocked and upset that there is that kind of bonding. And I think we're not ready for that. And so, there'll be a hype cycle around that as well.
Interesting. And I think that movie's been done, right, with her.
Her.
Right.
Well, that's falling in love,
Yeah.
but there are other kinds of bonding. There is, I think I'm already seeing with some young people who have the always on AI, and
Yeah.
they're working, and it becomes this code generator. And so I think for a lot of people, like being creative or productive without their AI will be for like those who don't have their glasses, and they need their
Right.
glasses
Right.
just to function. And so it's not like falling in love with their glasses. It's like, no, there is a working relationship where you're at your best, so to speak, with this thing. And so you have a very strong bond with it.
Well, that gets into things you've talked about with, what's the best job for a robot is to drive efficiency. And I was thinking about when my kids started driving and they had to go across town, not very far, and they got the Garmin out, right? I was
Right.
right. And it's a form of it's a form of robotics, right? I mean, I'm gonna use this machine to tell me where to turn,
Right.
and now, of course, it'll do the driving for you. But
Sure. Yeah.
um,
We had this dream that the robots were going to do our plumbing so that we can write poetry, but it turns out that the robots are writing poetry, and we're going to do the plumbing
yeah,
because
no,
they can't do the plumbing.
it's a great
Um,
reversal.
right.
It's a great
Right.
reversal, Kevin. If you just for my last question here, and I just love to give love to get a final insight and sort of the third verse of the podcast is the now what. So what if, so what, now what? You have so many bits of wisdom, and I encourage everyone to find it. But you mentioned the doomers, the believers, but I think there's a lot of optimism, right? And as you think about, you made a comment about pain being inevitable and suffering being optional. So, there may be change, that's coming, is a form of pain, and it's inevitable. As you think about the changes happening in the world today, and you think about the potential of some of this technology, what is one piece of advice you would give to listeners to be prepared?
Well, I think no matter what age you are, you're going to spend the rest of your life learning new things. So what you want to do is get really good at learning. And ideally, you would learn how to optimize your learning. You would figure out how you learn best in different situations, different kinds of learning. And you would actually test and improve and become better at learning and arrive at the point where you have optimized your own knowledge of how you learn best, because you're going to be a newbie for the rest of your life.
That's a good self-reflection for people.
Mm-hmm.
And a good admission. Kevin, thank you so much for what you've done, and your writings and what you've shared, and especially what you've shared with us today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining.
You're very welcome. I appreciate the time to be here and your great questions.
Okay, thank you.
You've been listening to What If, So What, a digital strategy podcast from Proficient with Jim Hertzfeld. We want to thank our Proficient colleagues J.D. Norman and Rick Bauer for our music. Subscribe to the podcast and don't miss a single episode. You can find this season along with show notes at proficient.com. Thanks for listening.